Greetings, everyone. I'd like to welcome you today to a seminar titled Connected Vehicles, Public and Private Policy, Collaboration, and Data Exchange. I'm pleased to be joined by Ms. Amanda Hamm, Virginia DOT representative and head of the Connected Vehicles Pooled Fund Program, and Mr. Fahad Shuja with the Ontario Good Roads Association and Macabo. Today's discussion will focus on the role of the public sector with connected and automated vehicles, or CAVs, and how public sector, academia, and private sector can cooperate in building a smarter transportation network. If the audience has any questions about this presentation or the presenters, I encourage you to reach out to me or to Janet Reno, the MATSI coordinator. My contact information is shown here. To begin, I'd like to thank the Mid-America Transportation Center, or MATSI, for hosting today's webinar. MATSI is the Region 7 US DOT University Transportation Research Center with the headquarters located on the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. MATSI researchers collaborate with the U.S. Department of Transportation to perform research related to MATSI's theme of improving safety and minimizing risk associated with increasing multimodal freight movements on the U.S. surface transportation system. The location of the MATSI website is shown here. Please note that after the completion of the webinar, a recording of the presentation and summary materials will be available on the MATSI website. The collaborating universities of MATSI are shown here and consist of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, the University of Nebraska-Omaha, University of Nebraska Medical Center, University of Iowa, University of Kansas Medical Center, Lincoln University, Nebraska Indian Community College, and the Missouri University of Science and Technology. Smart transportation systems are needed to address major safety concerns worldwide. In the US, there are approximately 35,000 deaths each year resulting from car crashes, in addition to approximately 100,000 severe or disabling injuries and billions of dollars spent in crash documentation, cleanup, traffic congestion, and emergency response. For example, approximately $1 billion in societal costs occur in the US each year, solely related to run-off road crashes with trees. Technologies offer the opportunity to improve safety by keeping vehicles on the road and actively avoiding crash events through active braking assist, lane keeping, and blind spot warning, and can reduce urban congestion and improve transportation efficiency with smart signalization, corridor identification, and in-vehicle notifications. The public sector, including state departments of transportation and government bodies, are principal stakeholders and in the assets used by CAVs, including roads, roadside signs, wireless communication hardware, and passive traffic monitors. Thus, the private sector innovations require collaboration and partnership with the critical public sector agencies. Today's speakers will address major issues in CAV operations from the public sector position. Ms. Hamm will discuss the Connected and Autonomous Vehicles Pooled Fund Program and challenges upcoming for CAV implementation. And Mr. Shuja will discuss the progress on an automated ready Windsor-Ottawa Corridor, an online road mapping tool, and public-private data exchange. So Amanda, if you're available to unmute, you're welcome to share your screen and proceed with your presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm signing in as soon as I can on the screen share. And give me just 1 second to get the PowerPoint presentation in presentation mode as opposed to regular mode. All right, Cody, can you confirm for me that everything worked?
It looks like it's looking great, Amanda.
Fantastic. All right, as Cody mentioned, my name is Amanda Hamm, and I am the Virginia Department of Transportation's Connected and Automated Vehicle Program Manager working out of the Office of Strategic Innovation. And yes, that is a mouthful, and no, it does not fit all on my part. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the connected vehicle side of things, but I'm going to start off with a brief overview of our connected and automated vehicle program. I'm going to highlight some of our connected vehicle efforts, particularly on the research side. And then I'm going to go over VDOT and the Connected Vehicle Pool Fund study before finally ending with an overview of the questions that today's CV research is looking to answer specifically on behalf of the public sector and some of the challenges that we've identified when it comes to both the research and how to take that research from the sort of theoretical field and into actual operations. So VDOT has developed a framework for innovation that is championed by the Office of Strategic Innovation, where my program sits. The Office of Strategic Innovation has a mission to champion the use of innovative approaches and tools in the department and promote a culture of innovation in VDOT. The way we've approached innovation within VDOT is to sort of bucket it. We have the core innovations, which are those that apply to sort of VDOT's day-to-day activities, bread and butter work that we do all the time and know very, very well, and also involves innovations or updates that are pretty well known. Going beyond that, you get into the adjacent bucket, which covers sort of, again, pushing a bit towards the more new side of VDOT's capacity, along with pushing towards use of newer, sort of understood, but not quite incorporated into everyday business innovations. And then the final bucket is transformational. So this is looking at sort of VDOT's capacity. We kind of like to think about it as sort of the VDOT of tomorrow, where we're going to end up in the future. And it's also looking at incorporating cutting edge technologies. And VDOT views CAVs, particularly fully automated and fully connected vehicles, to fall into the transformational side or transformational bucket when it comes to innovation. And as a result, we're looking at a technology or technologies that could impact many of VDOT's functions significantly in the coming decades. And in recognition of that, we have been doing a significant amount of research and pilots in the area of connected vehicles. Today, I'm focusing on those in part because there's more for public infrastructure owner-operators to need to understand there than automated vehicles that don't require quite as much infrastructure. So one of our largest efforts is the creation of the Virginia Connected Corridors Partnership. Now, this is two test beds, one in Northern Virginia and one in Blacksburg, Virginia, that we use to conduct all sorts of research of our own and also to invite others to do their own research on features. And the partnership is between VDOT, specifically the Virginia Transportation Arm within the department, and Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, who operates both test beds on our behalf. So first things first, the Smart Road at VTTI. We have multiple sort of scenarios or multiple environments at that Smart Road. It is a closed test track, so it can be blocked off for specific testing. There's an urban environment that involves movable buildings and setups where you can have sort of a dummy human run across the road, those kinds of testing. There's also a stretch that you can see sort of on the far left and in the middle that is more like a highway. It can produce adverse weather. As you can see, there's pouring down rain, and when the temperatures are sufficient, it can also produce snow, which, as you can imagine, is very good for testing of all sorts of sensors. And the final picture shows a bridge, which one is beautiful, and two goes out to the final expansion currently planned, which is a rural test bed area that will match, as the description implies, roadways that are scattered throughout the nation that are at a rural standard or sort of 1960s type maintenance level, in order to give these technologies a test track that is not just the brand new best stuff to offer, because from a funding standpoint, that's just not a roadway we can guarantee will be everywhere at all times. And that test bed has all sorts of private industry folks that come and test, and then we also have anything that we support will be tested there as well. Now, the Northern Virginia test bed is a different beast. It's on open roadways. The public uses it. If you've driven in Northern Virginia, you'll notice that the public uses it a lot. It's a very busy area. And we have roadside units scattered throughout this corridor. We have 30 that are at intersections and 19 that are on the freeway. And you can see in the picture there, the roadside units is the tiny box that's attached to the traffic signal pole arm. And to give you an idea of how that monitoring system or whole system is set up in Northern Virginia, this sort of explains all the pieces. It was designed to allow us to test as much as possible. So we've got the controller, which standard controller used across Virginia. There's a firewall that protects it from the connected vehicle applications to the outside. That controller sends raw signal timing data to the RSU, which then converts it into SPAT, so signal phase and timing messages concerning the status of the controller, and a map message, which is the literal map of how the lanes are designed, direction, lane width, etc. Now that information is then passed from the roadside unit to two locations. One, the VCC cloud, which is our data hub and processing center. It is also broadcast via DSRC to vehicles that are capable of receiving that information. Now the information that goes to the VCC cloud is then processed and put into our VCC monitor application, which is, as it sounds, monitors both the controllers and the health of the RSUs. And then that information is then pushed out via a cellular carrier to a mobile app, which again can be used in a vehicle to inform the driver, or I suppose in future years, the vehicle itself of the signal status if it is not capable of receiving the DSRC messages. So that's how we have designed our system. It's provided us with great testing opportunities concerning how we use the cloud, what kind of messages, latency. And as a result of it, we've been able to expand to even further efforts. And these are just a few we have today. I have more pilots that have utilized the VCC, but I wanted to highlight these couple ones because they show what direction this kind of research can take you in, which is honestly an entirely new one than the one you started with. This diagram shows three things we already talked about, which are the monitor, the cloud, and the mobile interface. And then from those learnings, we've also started some other projects, the Work Zone Builder application, which has both an operations based usage and a connected automated vehicle type use case. So the operations use case is the builder application is somewhat what it sounds like, in that you build a digital map of a work zone. It's a very cool application that's currently under research. So what you do is, in a VDOT employee, a contractor identifies a segment of roadway on which a work zone should be built. The application pre-populates it with suggested work zone designs based on Virginia's rules. So it'll put out so many, or note that cones should be at this much distance and how many cones, other signs, etc., which the employee or contractor can then manipulate as required for the specific scenario. That work zone is then saved to the cloud. And then can be, the thought is that it eventually would allow for VDOT to process work zone plans very quickly instead of having to sort of email documentations back and forth or use paper document. That process could go quite quickly. Likewise, they would be stored in the cloud so that if you needed to come back, say, the next week and do the adjacent lane going perhaps the opposite direction, the app allows you to mirror a work zone or to pull up a previous one and apply it again so you can basically build precisely what you did before and have that information at your fingertips. Obviously, the connected vehicle aspect of this is then being able to broadcast the fact that a work zone exists to these vehicles. And over time, the hope would be that we get to more detailed broadcasts, not just that there's a work zone in a quarter mile, but there's a work zone in a quarter mile. You driver, vehicle or human, will need to merge to the left lane. The work zone lasts for 0.1 of a mile, and you're going to be going 35 miles per hour. And yes, there are workers present. That kind of information being processed and provided to everyone on the roadways, hopefully making everyone safer. In conjunction with that, when I mentioned the workers present, we are also looking at a VCC connected vest, which is what it sounds like as well. We are very consistent in our naming goals here. And that is literally a connected vest that the worker wears. And the idea is that it alerts others via the VCC cloud that workers are present. Potentially, it might even give you an idea of how close they are so that you would be even more careful, particularly when it comes with complicated work zones that may be hard for people to suss out. Likewise, it's going to alert the worker who's wearing it to where they are in the work zone. So if they're straying outside of the bounded work zone safe area, which again, complicated work zones, it can be somewhat difficult to know, so that they come back into the safely demarcated location. Likewise, there is research being done to build an alert to workers from the vest that if the work zone is breached by something unexpected, i.e. a vehicle, the vest would alert the worker to something coming in and potentially alert the worker to move to a safer location. As you can imagine, the human factors research on that is pretty fascinating. So that's an example of all of the stuff that we have with the Virginia Connected Corridors and how we're using it to really understand all sorts of different connected vehicle aspects, both the infrastructure side and then the sort of user side of our transportation system. If you would like more information, this is just the website and the link. Alternatively, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions. Now, I went over one of the examples of the state efforts that we do. I'd also like to talk about some of the regional, national, and in this particular case, international, because the Transport Canada is also involved, efforts that we have and that are necessary to move connected vehicle research to where it needs to be. So the Connected Vehicle Pool Fund study was established in 2009, and it is led by VDOT and administered by the University of Virginia on our behalf. And the point of this pooled fund is to facilitate the development and evaluation of connected vehicle applications, is in really looking at that research of how do we make this operational. And so we do lots of projects that collaborate across all of these agencies, looking at a number of different technologies. And to give you an idea of that, I did want to go over our 4 active projects, which will sound pretty similar to some of the things that the VCC is also looking at, to give you an idea of how common these questions are. So we have the vehicle to infrastructure queue advisory and warning. Again, as it sounds, this is looking at when queues build up, which are dangerous and also a sign that traffic is not moving as efficiently as possible. Looking at how those advisories and warning applications might be set up, just things from distance to timing to how do you set up a dynamic message sign, what kinds of warnings. So that kind of design is being covered by that project. Then we have the Multimodal Intelligent Traffic Signal System Phase 3, or MITS Phase 3, which is looking at something somewhat similar to the VCC setup, which is integrating connected vehicle devices and information into traffic signal control systems. And this one is particularly looking at multiple modes of travelers, so including things like pedestrians. And their 2 sites where they're doing work are Arizona and California. Our third project is using third parties to deliver infrastructure to vehicle information. Going back to what the VCC has with the VCC Cloud and the VCC Monitor, that's great information that we're broadcasting, but let's face it, a lot of people are more likely to use things like Waze or Here to get their data because it just has so much more into it and has a very specific user interface that people are used to. So we would like to utilize those third parties to make sure everyone is as informed as possible so that they can move quickly and safely. But setting up such a sharing of data does require a fair amount of consideration as to what data, when is the data sent, how is the data sent, how often is it sent. So all of those types of questions are being looked at by that project. And then our newest project is the creation of a guidance document for map preparation. So again, a map message is the literal map of the roadway. And there is a fair amount of standardization on aspects of map message transmission. But when it comes to the preparation, there are still a lot of questions and flexibility out there. For instance, if you have a curve and you have nodes that you are placing along the curve to measure how the geometry is working, how many nodes do you have? If you have a tighter curve, do you need more? Do you need less? Those types of questions are being looked at by that project. And once again, I always like including a slide with the link to the website if you would like to know more about the research. That's both the current projects are there, and then you can also find all the past projects. Since it's been up since 2009, there are a number of them. And again, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. All right, so I've covered sort of a state effort on connected vehicle research and a regional, national, international effort on connected vehicle research. And so I wanted to close on a sort of baselining of where we are now. And I'm sure many of you are looking at this and going, Amanda, you provided us with the slide that already had the answers to it earlier. It's not very surprising, or it's not very helpful to have questions now. But what I will say is while the VCC has one setup in place, there are still a lot of research questions just sitting in that one scenario. For instance, when you're looking at the controller, are we going to even use roadside units, or do we have a central signal system that broadcasts information, say, via the cloud or via utilizing a cellular broadcast? When we have the firewall, it makes sense to have one, but what security requirements should that firewall be made to sort of follow? At the same time, what kinds of security testing needs to go into place, or security certifications, particularly as we're seeing more and more devices, figuring out whether or not they meet security requirements becomes a very challenging and constantly updating task. For the devices, which devices do you use? There are new devices every day, but more so than that, it's one thing to have 50 devices for research. It's another thing entirely to have a device for, say, every one of the thousands of traffic signals within a state. You know, just purchasing them, particularly when you think of not just its signals, but actually along, say, freeways, is one thing, but maintaining them is another. Updating them is a final thing, in the sense that many of these may have software updates, which loops you back into some of the security issues. When it comes to the cloud, one of the question is, how do you best utilize it? That's something across a lot of infrastructure owner-operators operations is utilizing that cloud, and that is the same case with these research efforts. And for the monitor, we have a monitor system for our research projects, but incorporating that into day-to-day operations and what information is necessary when it comes to operationalizing something for 24/7 access and use is a question. And then we have for cellular. Now, many of you may have heard about 5G and putting out small cells and other things that are usually in the past have sometimes been placed in our right-of-ways, which has its own process. That process probably doesn't need to change, but it may all of a sudden have a whole bunch more to deal with as there's the rollout of 5G and other options. the interfaces. We have the Monitor, our mobile app built for our researchers' use. But moving forward, as we talked about, you partnering with Waze or Here or some other third party, or providing our own interface, those types of questions are very important when you consider hoping people adopt any of these safety-related applications. And the final questions, just in this scenario again, is which vehicle applications are going to actually be there? And this is something that in infrastructure owner operators, we can make requests, and we do all of the time. We talk to vehicle developers and manufacturers and say, work zone safety type ideas. But at the end of the day, they also are looking to consumers, they're looking to their engineers and putting out applications that in and of themselves may change the infrastructure necessary to support them. And all of these questions that are out there and many more are being answered by our research efforts today. But as you can imagine, these kinds of questions do lead to challenges. And to my mind, there are a couple that are perhaps the big ones to deal with. First and foremost is, well, there's a lot of questions. It is an ecosystem that supports these technologies. It is not just a vehicle. It is not just a roadside unit. There is an amazing amount of interconnected devices and systems that are necessary to make this work to the fullest extent and most beneficial outcome possible. On top of that, anytime you make a decision for one of these questions, it likely will impact your options when answering other questions. Taking again, the vehicle application scenario. For instance, if you are looking at a red light violation warning type application, then that's at a traffic signal and you're going to need some sort of broadcast of SPAT and map message type information from the traffic signal. And so you're going to get into devices and things. But if you're talking about work zone safety at a mobile work zone, well, that's going to have different needs. It's not going to have a device that's literally attached to a roadway. It's going to have something that moves. And so that is a big sort of challenge with all of these questions. And sort of the final question, or the final challenge really, is that is the one that is true across all CAV related work, is who knows what everyone's going to want most tomorrow. We've seen that particularly with the COVID situation, that consumers and transportation system users are changing their patterns, and particularly with new technology, which is difficult to understand, which is a challenge in of itself, explaining to people what these applications are, what their benefits or their negatives are, and how a infrastructure owner operator is going about preparing for both, is a challenging conversation to have, which is sort of encompassed in the bigger issue of understanding and tracking what our citizens really want out of their infrastructure. And with that, I will close and say thank you for listening. Here's my contact information. I love CAVs. I'm always happy to talk about them. So please feel free to reach out to me if you would like. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Cody.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda. That was terrific. And now we will be accepting further questions for Amanda. And if you have any questions you would like, I would encourage you to submit those via the chat. They will be monitored, and I will then relay those questions to Amanda then thereafter. Amanda, I'd say that the first question I have for you is a lot of your discussion looked at the ability to have connected vehicles integrating with the infrastructure itself. What challenges do you think are present in order to expand the network to include, for example, rural or low service roads?
Okay, there's a couple of challenges there. One of the main ones being that connected infrastructure requires communication channels. Now, we have a couple of options that are still being sussed out. They have DSRCs, direct short range communication, which does require a roadside unit. And then there's also cellular, which can be done either via a roadside unit or via a central broadcast signal. Now, either one of those are going to require back-end communication support of some sort, either cell towers and strong cell signals for the cellular or Wi-Fi for the DSRC. In addition, a lot of these safety applications have to have very low latency. If it's not coming fast enough, you can't make a good decision. And so that means you need things like fiber in some cases in order to make sure that your information is moving as quickly as it needs. Now, obviously, a number of sort of rural areas are struggling to have broadband and other communications, internet, et cetera, now. And so it's more of a sort of niche issue along that broader issue that needs to be addressed. Now, we are constantly looking into other new communication options. I believe one of them was a Zigbee net. There's all sorts of interesting efforts that we're trying to look into, but those are cutting edge communications technology. It may take us some time to understand them.
Very good. Thank you, Amanda. And what is the principal funding available for DOT interests in CAVs? Are there any federal services available for funding, or is it requiring private sector and internal DOT funds?
There's a lot of federal funding. Some is specific to CAV activities. For instance, the US DOT recently announced, well, maybe not recently, a number of months ago, announced their AVS grants, which are, I believe, stands for Automated Vehicle Systems. And so those were, I think, 8 or 10 grants. VTTI got 2, one dealing with automated vehicles in challenging scenarios and one dealing with automated trucking systems. In a lot of cases, there are federal funds built into other aspects of transportation that are just, that include advanced technologies. And so that's an area where you can get funding for it. The end of the day, though, is that while there is funding available, US DOT has done a great job on that. Federal Highway has a lot of options. There is some private funding, some partnerships like the pooled fund. There's still not enough for us to put every new shiny thing that we want everywhere, which is why this research to figure out what gets us the most benefit in the safest way possible is very necessary.
Very good. Thank you. Now, with respect to, for example, you mentioned vehicle breaches into work zones and monitoring the positions of vehicles with respect to the safety of those who are also adjacent to or using the road. What kinds of sample rates and connectivity needs do you have to have in order to be on the bounds of preventative as opposed to just simply a notification?
Are you referring to latency specifically, or are you referring to sort of equipment?
It would be a question of both. In terms of the latency, what is the maximum latency which you would feel comfortable, as well as like a signalization rate?
Okay, latency, we're talking milliseconds or tens of milliseconds. I'm afraid I can't off the top of my head list specifically what's been sort of said for each of the different applications. It sort of depends on which one, each one has different sort of thresholds. For instance, if you have an application that's actually stopping a vehicle, that probably needs significantly shorter periods of latency than an application that is intended to provide a warning. When it comes to devices, now there's a lot of interesting questions there because, you know, infrastructure provides sort of a base that people can access for information. The vehicles will have their own sort of data sets that they broadcast in the connected world. And then when it comes to other road users, it is sort of a question about what they will choose. Many people will likely choose a smartphone, but if that is not an option for someone, it's still up in the air what might be the solution there. In that case, there will be a more limited role for infrastructure owner operators in the sense that we can provide services and try and provide them on as many platforms as possible. but it will be up to pedestrians, cyclists, et cetera, to figure out what they want. And it will be on us to help them sort of be aware of what options are available.
Excellent. I'll ask one more question before we break to move Fahad forward. And that would be, is there any implementation with wearable devices besides, you mentioned the work zone vest, application to phones or smartwatches?
I am not aware of any that VDOT is specifically involved in. That being said, I see a whole lot of potential for it. I'm a runner. I have a running app that tells me how far I've run. Sometimes I think it lies to me and I ran much farther than it actually recorded. But those kinds of applications could potentially be utilized. The question on that side does get a little bit into privacy concerns. It's one thing for a DOT to broadcast. We have a light signal and it's red. It can be a little tricky for some other folks to decide that they want a cellular device to broadcast precisely where they are. So that application has a lot of research left to be done on a lot of different levels.
Very good. Thank you very much, Amanda. And if you have any further questions for Amanda, you're welcome to submit them into the chat, and we will have an open panel discussion at the very end of the presentation. But with that, I would like to proceed to introduce Mr. Fahad Shuja, who is with the OGRA in Macavo. Fahad, are you able to unmute and share your slides now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Let me continue share my screen. All right, let me know when you see the screen, please.
We can see it, and you are good to go.
Perfect, thanks, Cody. Great presentation, Amanda. Thank you. It's difficult to follow that, but I'll do my part. First of all, thank you, and hello from Canada. So I'll cover a bit of things today, primarily, as Cody said, in the autonomous vehicles, connected vehicle side of things that we're doing in Ontario, primarily done from the lens of the Ontario Good Roads Association. As Cody mentioned, my name is Fahad Shuja. I am the coordinator for the member services for OGRA. Foremost, special thanks to Cody for the invite today, and also to Matsi for having us today. Really appreciate it. I wanted to talk a little bit about what OGRA is. So the association is a not-for-profit, and we go back to 1894. This is the time when the Good Roads movement was, what I've learned, was very high in the United States. And the idea, because although we're two different countries, we're pretty much, I think we have way too many things in common. So as this was happening in the U.S., in Canada, you had also the Good Roads movement happening, and hence the name, the Ontario Good Roads Association for the province of Ontario. In this movement, what was happening is that you had the transition of horses to cars, or horseless carriages that they used to call them. And this was a point when a handful of municipalities, I think there were 30 or so, that came together, and they decided that there was a need to have better roads in the province on the municipal level. There was different ownership styles of the roads at that point. I won't go into that level of detail, but essentially what was the case was there was not enough good roads, and so what our association members had to do was actually take a train down to different parts of the province and go with our staff, our equipment, our materials, and best practices on how to build roads, and teach that to the municipality, come back, and then go to the different municipality and do it all over again. Now, this went on for, it started back then, but sort of in a way it's kind of continuing because OGRA has this extensive, we don't have the training anymore, unfortunately, but we do still have an extensive program of education. So we go to different places and we have these events that we put out to help create good and sustainable roads. Now, if you fast forward to 2020, about 126 years since the beginning, OGRA represents 420 of the 444 municipalities that are in the province. Now, what we noticed, we've been keeping in mind, the whole transition that's been happening since the DARPA challenges for autonomous vehicles. So when we look at the original beginnings of OGRA with the whole transition from horses to cars, and now the transition being within the vehicle going from a manual to truly automatic, we feel that it is absolutely in our DNA to come to support the municipalities once again in this major transition. Now, what allows us to do this, the work that I'm going to talk to you about is the fact that we have a very strong regulation within the province on a state level, let's say. The regulation was initiated in 2016, January, and it has been updated as of 2019, January 2019. And what the updated, so in 2016, the regulation allowed for testing of vehicles anywhere in the province. What the 2019 regulation does, and now I'm going to put in something that the younger audience may not know too much, but if you know Night Rider, Night Rider can actually become real in the province of Ontario today based on our regulation. So what this means is that is if Mike is in one part of the province and Kit is in a different part, he can actually summon Kit and it can drive to him autonomously and without anybody being in the driver's seat. Now, this is a little different in some of the regulations that may be in other places where the vehicle may be allowed to be tested, but you have to have somebody sitting in the driver's seat. So in case of Mike, I think it works great because, the kid is, it doesn't need anybody in the driving seat to get to him. As long as Mike has $5 million insurance and follows all the Ministry of Transportation Ontario requirements that are laid out quite clearly. So with that, I think the main gatekeeper, I always take a point to thank the province and the Ministry of Transportation Ontario, is that they've done an awesome job at getting us to this level, to enabling with such a strong regulation. And they are essentially the gatekeepers for any vehicle testing that has to happen. So if you have a vehicle and you want it to be tested in Ontario, you got to go through MTO. And after that, then all the stuff that we're going to talk about now, it will become relevant. Now, based on the regulation that we had, the next best thing we could do was to try to see how municipalities can come together and take advantage of this opportunity as best as possible. Now, keeping in mind that you have 444 municipalities in Ontario right now. And each one has its own personality. So although we, as a point of pride, as an association, that we are able to represent 420 of the 444, this number is not always looked at as a positive way from the private sector perspective, because that means that you have to knock on 400 plus doors just to get your product to anything, like even for a pilot, let's say. So for that reason, we created this, the Municipal Alliance for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles in Ontario, called MACAVO. And for this this group of municipalities, the first thing that we wanted to do was, just one step back is, just like in the United States, Canada also had the municipalities in Canada have the same issue of lack of resources, whether monetary or personnel. So if we were to go out to municipalities and say, listen, the vehicles are not here today, there's not enough of them, but we would like you to spend millions of dollars to try to update the infrastructure or to be prepared for something that we don't know how to prepare for. That wouldn't have gone too well. So instead, what we said was, at this point, what we're really looking for is the willingness of the municipalities to work together and not to have silos. The worst thing we could do to ourselves could be to have, each municipality could be doing their own thing, but never talking to a neighbor. So we wanted to break that silo even before it started. So this is where the Windsor-Ottawa Preferred Corridor came into play. And the crazy thought we had was primarily around level 4 and level 5 AVs. And the crazy thought was, this is a snapshot of the Southern Ontario side, which is the more populated area. The idea was, how do we go from the southwest side to the northeast? Southwest side, you have Detroit and Windsor, and northeast side, you have Ottawa, and then you enter into Quebec, the other province. So the crazy idea was, how could we possibly do a municipal corridor that's built up of these little puzzle pieces of all the municipalities that fall within it, so that a level 4 and level 5 vehicle could travel seamlessly between the 2 points. Now, the shortest distance between these 2 points is about 800 kilometers, or about 500 miles. So the idea was kind of crazy, but we went forward with it. And again, this was to understand how much are the municipalities willing to be a part of this, something like that. Within 8 months of that approach, we had 33 municipalities that came forward. And those 33 municipalities identified over 3,400 miles of preferred paved roads. And from that, it officially became the longest municipal corridor in the world. Now, this is on the municipal side. These are live roads that are being monitored by the municipality. And they also identified 9 miles of preferred unpaved or gravel roads, because there are a number of gravel roads in Ontario, and if the autonomous vehicles have to survive locally, then they better know how to deal with the gravel side as well. So we identified those 90 plus miles among various municipalities. These are some of the main primary municipalities that came forward and supported us in the project. To each of the municipalities that participated, we provided them a secure access to what we call the Mackable map. This is an online map, and in that, their task was to look at their own local municipal roads and highlight those with three different colors: preferred paved, preferred unpaved, and avoid. Sorry, if you give me just 1 second, I think my wife is kind of worried. She keeps messaging and she doesn't know that I'm in between this presentation. Hang on, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Sorry, okay, I'm back. So these 3 colors they had to color, and the neat thing was that any changes that they made, it all went live, or all goes live within about 10 to 30 seconds. This is a snapshot of what the map looked like when we publicly unveiled it in early February 2019. Now I'll go back and I'll show you what the actual map looks like. But one of the end goal of the Windsor-Ottawa corridor is not really just to create that connection in the roads of municipal roads. It's actually to kind of build it further into a data exchange that maybe the world has not yet seen. So what we did was we partnered up with Municipal 511, which actually takes in a lot of data straight from the municipalities, such as you have construction zone and a lot of other data, which I will show you. So some of the data include, for instance, you have these CCTV cameras that are at a municipal level, but also cameras that are on our highways. Then we have the weather as a layer. We have where the municipalities identify areas where there's no winter maintenance, so there may be safety issues. So those are identified in Municipal 511 as well. Then, of course, you have the construction zones where the roads are closed, either immediately or this happening in the future. with all details on, who's responsible, what person you can get to. And this is the stuff that's not really designed for autonomous vehicles, but it's more to get the municipal work all coordinated within the municipality and also with the neighbors, as well as the emergency responders. And also, we fully understand that in this world that we are in, silos are probably the worst thing that we could do to ourselves. And U.S. is our immediate neighbor, and it is important for all of us to continue to work together. And therefore, what we also added are the border wait times at all the borders that are connecting from Ontario to the United States. Now, these are some of the things that I've shown, but there's about 30 or so different data types that are available under Municipal 511 that we are able to take an API feed off of and include that in our map. In addition to that, we also worked with Mobile Tech for their Charge Hub project. And what this is basically they have of the electric charging stations identified across North America. And so we have a feed directly from them and all the charging station. Instead of us having to recreate those, we simply link them in. So all in all, what this is heading to is that, at the base level sits this preferred corridor, but our focus is now more on creating a data exchange where all this nearly real-time data is available to basically any computer, any phone. Setting up that stage for a massive road data exchange without us having to really host it. The only thing we do is we host the API feed, and then the responsibility goes back to the owner of that feed to make sure that it's all live. And the immediate benefit, of course, goes back to the autonomous vehicle testing to make sure that it's coordinated alongside municipalities. And of course, it's done in a safe fashion. So we're quite lucky in the province in the sense that we have a very strong provincial regulation. So let's say from the statewide. We also have very strong federal support that goes hand in hand. And then to add on to that, we have a local tech sector within Ontario, especially the GTA, Greater Toronto area, where the artificial intelligence side is growing very rapidly. And then finally, through the Windsor-Ottawa Corridor project, we were able to see that the municipalities are also showing strength. I just put in MMS, which is another regulation that we have that allows to make sure that the roads are maintained across the province in a certain standard. So if let's say the snow falls and it's X inches, it clearly states how quickly does the municipality needs to respond. And the good thing is that despite the fact that we have 444 municipalities in the province, each one sort of tries to adhere to that standard. So what that does in turn for autonomous vehicles is that it gives the opportunity to provide as seamless of road maintenance as possible across the province. Connect that to the McAvoy side of things. We feel it's a very good environment that we're trying to develop. Finally, what we have another project part of this Windsor-Ottawa Corridor is something we call Friends of McAvoy, where we work with different private and public organizations outside of municipalities. So you have associations and different private sector audience, and we give them access to the McAvoy map in which they're able to put their business location, and also they're able to show different events that they're holding and different projects that they're undertaking. All in all, the role that OGRA is playing in this whole thing is basically that plus sign between the public and the private sector, where we're trying to bridge those gaps, open some doors on both sides, and basically identifying where the opportunities are and enabling those synergies as best as we can. So I recognize we're just about 5 or 7 minutes away from the end. I'll quickly just show you what the map looks like. So here's one of the cities We have City of Hamilton, and so we have the road preferences. The city has kind of gone through and looked at which roads they would identify as preferred for level 4, level 5. These are green roads. Then you have the orange roads that are on void for various reasons, and then yellow are under consideration. Now, if I click on this, you can see more details on who's responsible, and that enables that, coordination between the public and private. As I zoom out more, you can see the live map. And again, this is any municipality can change anything within a matter of seconds. There's also these blue lines that are preferred, but gravel roads for testing as well. And in places that we're still working, and I think it's going to be a work in progress to get all the municipalities in the project. In places we don't have support yet, we have worked with the local Ministry of Transportation to highlight some of the highways that we can use to make sure that we do the complete run from Windsor to Ottawa. And then the other layers that I showed you there, this is all real stuff. So you have Charge Hub with all the charging stations. If I click on one of them, you can see where that is. And we give credit to Charge Hub by linking their site directly in, and you can see what station. Yeah, I clicked on the wrong one. And you can see, basically, you can go back to their site to see more details. Similarly, then we have, external sources. So you have construction zones that are happening. It shows you from when to when. And this is no simulation. This is all real-time stuff. Municipalities are actually subscribing to the service called Municipal 511, and so this information is it's not a crowdsourced information either. It's being done by the municipal staff, and they're of course the creator of the content. So that's the best road to go. Municipal 511 then also pushes this data out to Waze and TomTom and others, navigation providers, to make sure that things are in sync. Then we also have a bunch of other stuff. You have, I could spend probably the next half hour just to show you what the layers are. But the idea is that we're trying to get at making sure that, we don't necessarily need to be the ones to create all this data. There's lots of it available already, either through the public or private means. And our method is basically just to try to aggregate all of it together. So with that, I think that's the primary stuff I wanted to cover. And maybe perhaps we can open up to a few questions. We just have about 4 minutes left. Thank you. Head back over to Cody.
All right, thank you very much, Fahad. And now we will go ahead and open up for questions. For Fahad, again, if you would be willing to submit your questions to the chat, I will go ahead and relay those to Fahad then thereafter. We're going to go with a slightly abbreviated direct Q&A for you, Fahad, and then we'll open it up for questions for you and Amanda. I think the first question I have here is, how many private sector groups have approached you to be able to use, for example, that Transnomus map?
I'd say there are different types. So we have different types of, so we have people coming from VDOT'S side. We have people from artificial intelligence, so automatically detecting the pothole locations and giving more details and pushing that stuff straight into the map. In total, I can't think of the number. I think overall, as Friends of McEvoy, we probably would have given out probably 50 also.
Very good. And another question came in. Is there a rubric or a checklist provided to the municipality so that they could deem a road safe, for example, as not sufficient for an L4 or L5 level CAV?
Very good question. If the person can contact me, please, because I think that you're thinking what we've been planning. Short answer is no, not right now. Initially, we started with giving some guidelines to say what to avoid. But as an example, we said maybe to avoid the school zones and hospital zones, heavy areas like that. But then some municipalities came back and said, well, those are the areas where we have issues with manual drivers, so we would like to see if AVs could help. So then we pulled back our request, and now to date, it has been to their liking. So if as long as they're comfortable, they can turn it on. But going forward, we do intend to have that special checklist, yes. But if the gentleman or lady that asked if they can contact me, I'd love to talk more.
You know who it is? It's Amanda.
Oh, Amanda, okay.
So,
great, let's talk.
When you're looking at your environmental data, is this a push-to system where an environmental data can inform a vehicle that there are adverse weather ongoing or in consideration? And is that able to affect a CAV's speed?
So our focus right now is to make sure that the data aggregate is there, and it's being pushed through a map. So we're not at this phase concentrating on communication with the AVs. The idea is that we will make that information available to the provider, and then they can consume that information and use it however they wish. Going forward, I'm sure that we're going to have to take a larger role. But right now, we want to make sure that, it's kind of like that scene. The best way I can explain it is, in the Matrix, the first one where you have Neo standing at the end of corridor, and he looks at the world and you have these two agents in front of him trying to shoot him, and Neo kind of raises his hand and realizes that, the world around him doesn't really exist. It's all digital. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that matrix world as best as we can at this point, where we're not trying to create agents, but we want to create that from curb to curb and around for autonomous vehicle, make it as digitally real time as possible so that people can then tap on that information and do all sorts of cool stuff with it.
All right, very good. For the interest of time, we're now going to open up questions to both Amanda and Fahad before we close. And the first question I have for Amanda is, how do you control the expenses of your system and the operation for DOTs or municipalities?
It's certainly sort of different to each project. Most of ours are sort of specific projects that we're aiming for. The VCC is part of an ongoing sort of maintenance budget with our research council. For a specific project, I guess we mostly sort of come in with a fairly set scope of work for our various universities, and then they work to that, similar to our other task order type projects. So I'm not sure if that really helps any, but at least for our work thus far, at least the research side of things tends to be project oriented. And then for things that are doing on the operational side that are in support of sort of CAV eventual deployments are usually folded into the actual project. For instance, our Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion included in their contract that there needed to be extra fiber, extra power, extra space in cabinets, with the idea being that there will one day be devices that we know we'll want to put in, but for now we'll at least lay the foundation. And so those are sort of the two ways that we do it.
That's excellent. Thank you, Amanda. And for Fahad, you had mentioned that right now your primary source of data are the municipalities within Ontario. Do you see any private sector interactions besides, for example, the Charge Hub contributing data to this road network and that map as also being valuable?
Absolutely, yes. So from the municipal side, if you can imagine, the focus or the data that they can provide is essentially the stuff that's happening on the road or anything that they're proposing to happen. So if there's construction zone, detours, weight limitations, overhead bridges, that sort of stuff that they are responsible for. Everything else, all sorts of, I think the innovation side will come from the industry. And that's why we created the group or the program called Friends of Mackerel. So as an example, we're working with one of the companies that's supposed to basically install themselves within the ITS digital side of things and not have to update the traffic signal itself, and instead use signal timing or send signal timings based on either LTE or 5G onto the mobile phones. And that kind of helps us, kind of stay focused on the digital side versus having to install physical hardware. Not to say that we wouldn't install physical hardware, but right now, because the things are moving so fast, we're just focusing on the digital side. Then the other example I gave was the other company that's doing pothole detection. And so those we're working with to see how that data could be readily brought into the map as well. Then we're also looking at bringing some of the the cell phone service providers to bring in, what is the connectivity level like for mobile phones and all parts of the province. And that will give you a good hint on, how well can a vehicle stay connected through the course. So yes, the short answer is absolutely. I think that the private sector is going to play a major role. It already is. I think they are driving this train forward. And by coming forward and bringing our municipalities along, we're trying to showcase the fact that we need to be at the table. We're here to help, and we're not trying to impede any innovation in any way.
All right, so I'd have a follow-on question from me on that respect. How do you control conflict of interest if this continues to grow and there are different competitive companies who each wish to interface with you?
Absolutely, yeah, very good question. So as a not-for-profit, our main element is to make sure that we're transparent and we're not favoring any one side over the other. In some cases where you see innovation happening only at one company, that of course that's the only company that you show. But otherwise, we've been very clear with all of our communications with all the stakeholders, especially with the private sector, to say that we cannot provide specific help to specific companies. It has to be a broader approach. That said, we're always open to doing pilot projects with specific companies. We have those the municipalities that are on the corridor very much willing and ready to do all sorts of tests. So if you're looking to do any test, we can always connect. But yeah, transparency, I think that's a huge thing.
Very good. And my last question comes to Amanda, and that would be approximately how many vehicles are currently in production or near production who are ready to interface with the kinds of features shown with the VCC, et cetera?
Oh, the short answer is not many, in the sense that we have a sort of chicken and the egg scenario, which is that it costs us millions of dollars to put out things at an operational level, and it costs the manufacturers millions of dollars to put out a new model that has these features. We're starting to see where we're kind of moving forward together. We do seem to have some neat recent announcements in the news from various manufacturers. I think one just announced that they were going to have the capacity in either their 2021 or 2022 models for cellular. And that's the final question, is that on both sides of the manufacturing and the infrastructure, the FCC's ruling about DSRC and cellular has meant that it's been a little unclear for some time which way to go. And so that has also sort of slowed things. But I would say just with automated vehicles, we're likely to see in the next couple of years significant change in what we have on the roadways.
Very good. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Fahad. I really appreciate both of you spending the time. I'd also like to thank the MATSE for hosting this webinar, Larry Raylet, the director, Jane Moreno for her work as the coordinator, as well as the student staff, assistants, administrators, and partner universities. So I'd like to thank the Midwest Roadside Safety Facility for helping to host and support some of the material behind the scenes. And the audience, I appreciate your kind attention. There are two upcoming MATSE CAV-related seminars, one next week to be held between 1 and 2 p.m. It's actually going to be hosted by yours truly about a MATSE-funded project related to an alternative paradigm using V2I relationship to help vehicle lane staying. And as well, there's going to be a subsequent one. The details are still in progress, but will be provided by next week, involving wireless research and vehicle connectivity with respect to the hardware and lessons learned with roadside units. So thank you all for your time. I would recall that the seminar will be available online at the MATI website, as well as with MWRSF website once these materials are completed and summarized and collected. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Cody. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. I've had a great time.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.